What is up, my cutouts? Cardboard Ninja here, bringing you another tier list. This time around, we're taking a look at the medium cabins in Crossout and rating them from best to worst. If you like what you see here, be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Cardboard Ninja content. Also, you can come and join me on Twitch as I stream there live all the time. Without further ado, let's get to the list. As always, we'll start with the things that all medium cabins have in common. Unless otherwise noted, light cabins have an average energy for their tier, 8 for common, 10 energy for rare, 11 energy for special, and 12 energy for epic and legendary. But from there, that's about it. Unlike heavy cabins who have a maximum speed between 60 and 70 kilometers per hour with a high power stat and poor acceleration, or light cabins who land between 95 and 105 kilometers an hour with middling power stat and typically great acceleration, medium cabins run the gamut. The movement parts they can use effectively, their power and maximum tonnage can vary wildly. In Crossout, medium cabins basically are the jack of all trades. You can find them as fast and as small as light cabins, or you can find them as heavy and bulky and as tanky as heavy cabins, or anywhere in between. And of course, with all of that in mind, when rating a part, size matters. Smaller is better than larger, and a perk that increases damage is weighed more heavily than a perk that increases durability. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Fittingly, we're going to kick off this tier list with the category of the first cabin in the game, truck cabins. Truck cabins are the Gorilla, Huntsman, Thug, Bear, Fury, and Jockey, appropriately named because they look like, well, trucks. With the exception of the Jockey, all of these cabins are 9 pins long, 6 pins wide, and 4 pins tall, the Jockey being the largest of the bunch at 10 pins long, 6 pins wide, and 5 pins tall. With the exception of the Jockey and Fury, these cabins have better than average weld points, the Jockey and Fury having very poor weld points. The Gorilla. Being the first cabin in the game given to all players, it is by design one of the worst cabins. With an adjusted maximum mass of 5,640 kilograms, poor power and acceleration, it's only notable that it has the game's lowest energy for a cabin at 7. And at a top speed of 65 kilometers an hour, it is obviously D tier. The Huntsman and Thug come in at 6,300 and 6,200 adjusted maximum mass, respectively, also with poor power and acceleration with a top speed of 75 kilometers an hour. It should be noted they are effectively identical to each other and both also come in at D tier. The Bear comes in with 8,350 adjusted maximum mass, has medium power but low acceleration, and has a top speed of 75 kilometers per hour. The Bear is possibly the best of the truck cabins and could last a new player a good amount of time before moving on in the game. C tier. The Fury weighs in at 8,150 adjusted maximum mass with a medium power and acceleration and with a top speed of 80 kilometers an hour, the fastest of the truck cabins, but the extremely poor weld points hold it back into D tier. The Jockey is the heaviest of the truck cabins at 8,600 adjusted maximum mass with a medium power but poor acceleration and a top speed of 75 kilometers per hour. Unfortunately, the extremely poor weld points and awkward geometry also keep this to D tier. The Sprinter. With an adjusted maximum mass of 5,650, poor power and acceleration, the Sprinter has a top speed of 90 kilometers an hour and can be used with any movement parts but legs. Simple geometry of 6x4x4 pins and perfect weld points suit this cabin well. It is the second smallest cabin in the entire game. There are few builds out there that leverage these properties well. C tier. The WWT1 comes in with a moderate mass at 7,800 adjusted maximum mass, moderate power but low acceleration and a top speed of 70 kilometers per hour. The WWT1 has very poor weld points, and though it may not look at first glance, it actually is a cube sitting at 6x6x6 pins. The only notable thing about this cabin is that it is the lowest power score cabin that has the mass needed to actually mount a Scorpion. D tier. The Hot Rod. With the lowest maximum mass of a rare medium cabin at 8,100 adjusted maximum, medium power, and good acceleration, the Hot Rod reaches 85 kilometers an hour, fittingly the fastest rare medium cabin. Decent weld points on a 6x6x4 pin base make this cabin suited for all movement parts except for ML200 legs. Not the best cabin in the world, but it's one decent enough to take a new player far. C tier. Next up is the Wyvern. With an adjusted maximum mass of 8,150, medium power and acceleration with a top speed of 80 km per hour, the Wyvern has excellent weld points on an 8-pin long, 4-pin wide, and 5-pin high geometry. Because of its narrow, near-symmetrical profile, this cabin is an excellent choice for mini builds, including sideways hovers and big rim walkers for low power score. A great alternative for the lighter growl cabin, the Wyvern trades 1 energy for better acceleration, higher mass, better weld points, and more power. B tier. Some of you are going to look at this next cabin and rightfully ask, what's this doing on this list? The Carapace. This cabin has a deceptive mass value of 16,000 kilograms, but on closer inspection it has an adjusted maximum mass of 9,400, which is only above average mass for a medium cabin, though higher than the Jockey. With a very high power and medium acceleration, the Carapace has the dubious honor of having the game's lowest top speed of any cabin in the game at 50 kilometers an hour. This limits the Carapace to armored tracks or heavier only. So once again, we ask, isn't this a heavy cabin? I say no. This is classified as a tank cabin, and unlike all other heavy cabins, it sports the typical 10 energy found on medium cabins for its rarity, and its maximum mass falls squarely within the bounds of medium cabins. Truly an odd duck, the Carapace does have nearly perfect weld points on its 6x4x10 pin geometry. But that is not nearly enough to save this cabin, since as far as movement parts go, tracks, especially heavier tracks, are considered the worst movement parts in the game, which this cabin exclusively uses. D tier. Moving on to another high mass medium, we take a look at the Pilgrim. With an adjusted maximum mass of 10,300 kilograms, the Pilgrim sports a higher than average power and acceleration with a top speed of 70 kilometers per hour. The Pilgrim has below average weld points on its very large 8-pin wide, 8-pin long, 5-pin high sloped geometry, which mimics many of the heavy cabins with somewhat open pockets on either side. You can find the Pilgrim cabin on just about any movement type in the wasteland. C tier. Out of the perk list and into the perks. We go from one heavy medium cabin to the next with my personal favorite medium cabin, the Step Spider. This cabin boasts the second highest maximum mass of any medium cabin at 12,750 kilograms, with a high power but poor acceleration and a top speed of 60 kilometers per hour. Excellent weld points cover this 8-pin long, 6-pin wide, 4-pin high cabin. While this cabin can be used with augers and heavier tracks, this perk exclusively provides a movement speed buff of 10 kph to the maximum movement speed of legs, such as the ML200 and Big Ram when in walker mode legs. This is the first cabin on this tier list that potentially could be used in the construction of a Leviathan, as the perk could increase the top speed of a walker Leviathan. Unfortunately, these Leviathans would be off-meta, as they are typically far too slow to be viable on larger maps. Unfortunately, while I do love this cabin, the ML200 legs are extremely poor, sporting a speed of 50 km per hour even with this cabin, and while this can affect the Big Rams, the alternate movement mode on those legs supplants this cabin's perk almost entirely. Without a buff to the legs that this cabin is designed to work with, this cabin can't get off the ground. C tier. Next up is the Howl. Boasting a higher than average adjusted maximum mass at 10,100 kilograms, the Howl has above average power and good acceleration, and with a top speed of 90 kilometers per hour, it is good with every movement part. The Howl has surprisingly excellent weld points on a 4-pin by 5-pin by 6-pin geometry. The perk of the Howl increases damage dealt, which is always a good thing, as long as there are enemies within 25 meters of the vehicle, ramping up slowly to 20% over 10 seconds. What the perk doesn't say is that when there are no such enemies nearby, you lose damage at effectively double that rate. Effectively gaining 2% damage every second, this cabin is great for melee, fire, or shotgun builds where you're within that very tight 25-meter range. Similar to the Echo, this perk can be used to detect if an enemy is nearby, as it will either increase or maintain even if the enemy is under the effects of a chameleon. However, due to the limited range of this perk, you're likely to be able to see them anyway. This cabin can be used as the base for a Leviathan in a pinch, however there are other cabins more suited for it. The damage perk is a bit too situational, as it is long to charge and short to discharge, and requires close proximity, but everything else about this cabin howls excellence. A tier. Next up is the Call. Attempting to be the premier cabin for drones, the Call has an average adjusted maximum mass of 9,550, with an average power and good acceleration, reaching 85 km per hour. This cabin is good to use with all movement parts except for the ML200 legs. Nice geometry with excellent weld points on this 6-pin wide, 4-pin tall, and 7-pin long cabin give it a medium profile. The perk of the call is simple. Each launched drone increases cabin power by 35% and grants the entire vehicle 10% damage reduction. Both bonuses cap at 3 stacks, giving it an effective maximum power stat and a 30% damage reduction to the entire build. While unorthodox, the call could be used as the base for Leviathan, though the effectiveness of the perk would be dubious as enemy Leviathans would snapshot the drones. Ultimately, the only thing holding this cabin back is the reliance upon a singular weapon type, which is hotly contended already by other cabins that boost damage-increasing perks. B tier. Next up is many players' favorite cabin. The favorite cabin sports an above-average adjusted maximum mass at 9,400, with above-average power and good acceleration, with a top speed of 90 km per hour, and is great with all movement parts minus the ML200 legs. The favorite's geometry is an excellent 6x6x4, with excellent weld points to boot. The perk of the favorite cabin charges while moving, and when activated stops the heating of weapons for 2 seconds. There are many weapons that can use this perk, most notably of which being most shotguns, which even if they receive a nerf are still a top tier weapon. Changes loom on the horizon for the favorite, supposedly a buff that will increase the duration of this perk depending on the weapons equipped. This is another cabin that has Leviathan potential, as many Leviathans attempt to boat heating weapons such as the Imp, Arbiter, or Retcher. Generally a great cabin for sustained DPS, the favorite earns its name. A tier. Next up is the speedster of the group. The Torero clocks in with an above-average adjusted maximum mass of 9,250 kilograms, with an above-average power and high acceleration, with a blistering 100 km/h maximum speed. It is compatible with all movement parts, except the ML200 legs, of course. Nearly perfect weld points are on the sleek 6-pin long and wide and 4-pin tall geometry. The perk on the Torero increases accuracy of all mounted weapons by 20%. This is a great perk to have in many situations, and basically works for every weapon in the game. Shotguns receive particular benefit as it tightens their cone of fire, mandrake shots are closer to their target, tap-fire machine guns can be fired longer while maintaining perfect accuracy, miniguns have a tighter cone, and the list just goes on. Interestingly, this isn't really viable for Leviathan, as the majority of the weapons on a Leviathan, which are controlled by an AI, are going to be pinpoint accurate in the first place. Though it should be noted that this will still tighten the cone of fire on the weapons mentioned above if mounted on Leviathan as well. A fast, versatile cabin. S tier. Moving along to the Quantum, coming in with an adjusted maximum mass of 9,400 kilograms with an average power and good acceleration, the Quantum clocks in with a 90 km/h top speed. As such, is able to make use of all movement parts. An excellently shaped cabin, 9 pins long and only 4 wide and tall, the Quantum has excellent weld points and geometry. Once upon a time, this was the only craftable epic medium cabin in the game. The perk of the Quantum boasts a 20% damage increase to all energy weapons, provided the vehicle hasn't taken any damage in the last 10 seconds. The good news about this perk is that means if you're using long-range energy weapons at the start of the match, your first shot is going to come with 20% more damage. The bad news is it is very unlikely to get this perk up and running again in a match once you've taken any damage at all. Unfortunately, due to the nature of this perk, the Quantum effectively has no potential as Leviathan. B tier. The Omnibox. Originally released with the Founders faction, the Omnibox has an adjusted maximum mass of 10,400 with a high power and an average acceleration with a top speed of 70 km/h. With its perk, it's suitable for every movement type in the game. Again, excluding ML200 legs. The Omnibox geometry is tall and thin, 4 pins wide, 6 pins tall, and 8 pins long with good weld points. One of 2 medium cabins in the game with 2 perks, albeit both of them not active simultaneously, the Omnibox can choose between 10% greater top speed and 20% more power, or 15% faster reload and weapon cooling rate. It should be noted that whenever a match begins, it is always set to the top speed and power perk, and the perk synergizes directly with the Big Ram legs released at the same time as the Omnibox. At one point in time, the perk granted 50% power instead of 20%, and this made the cabin extremely oppressive on hovers, far greater than it should have been. Even though it was reduced to a 20% power increase, the bonus to top speed in conjunction with any engine makes it possible for the Omnibox to get to the speed cap of hovers. Additionally, the Omnibox does have Leviathan potential, giving a bonus 15% to the reloading weapons, stacking with 20% from the reload module to 35%. And that ain't bad. A solid workhorse of a cabin with a perk that suits every weapon in the game and every movement type in the game. Begrudgingly, S tier. sliding onto this tier list nearly unseen, it's the Ghost. Sitting comfortably at 10,950 adjusted maximum mass, with an above average power and good acceleration, the Ghost has an 80 km/h top speed, and as such is suitable for all movement parts except for the ML200 legs. Unfortunately from there, the Ghost has awkward and bulky geometry, 6x6x10 pins, and abysmal weld points. The awkward geometry is akin to that of the Tusk, but with no real incentive to put the Ghost on the front of the vehicle. The Ghost's perk is as clunky as its geometry. As long as the vehicle is stealthed, that is to say under the effects of the Chameleon or Chameleon Mark II, the Ghost gains a stacking damage bonus of 2.5% per second for a total of 15% with the Chameleon, or 25% with the Chameleon Mark II, which then lasts for 5 seconds after stealth ends. So just so we're clear, the Ghost has no perk at all if you don't also have one of these modules. There is really only one weapon this cabin directly synergizes with, the Stillwind, whose perk will prevent the stealth from deactivating for 2 seconds after it fires. There is a buff to the Stillwind in the works that will extend this duration to a whopping 3 seconds. This is just a laughably bad combination. At best, it would mean that you would be able to start firing after 7 seconds of invisibility, ramping up from 17.5% bonus damage to the 25% damage bonus, which then will last for 5 seconds. In a game like Crossout, which is very fast-paced, this just isn't going to work, especially since the tracers from your weapons will lead right back to you in the first place. Needless to say, this has nearly no Leviathan potential, as the majority of the time you can't stop the Leviathan from selecting targets and shooting on its own. The Ghost has very decent stats, but there's a good reason this cabin is mostly unseen. C tier. Stepping up to the plate, we have the Photon, boasting a prodigious adjusted maximum mass of 11,000 kilograms, with above average power and good acceleration with a top speed of 80 kilometers an hour. The Photon is compatible with all movement parts. The Photon is large, 8 pins wide, 8 pins long, and only 4 pins high, notably 1 pin shorter than its predecessor, the Pilgrim. The geometry sports a rear pocket that is great for storing important things such as generators or fuel. The perk of the Photon is simple. All energy weapons deal more damage to heated parts. This damage caps at 130% when a part is at maximum heat. To be clear, this supplants, does not stack with, the natural heating damage bonus, meaning instead of the plus 100% damage for a fully heated part, energy weapons you use deal 130% damage to that part. The clunkiness of this perk seems surprisingly similar to the Ghost, where you have to bring a weapon that generates heat and an energy weapon to deal damage, however with notable exceptions that reduce the clunkiness. Allies who heat up your enemies will still grant your energy weapons the bonus damage. Allies don't have to heat your enemies with energy weapons. They can use thermal weapons such as flamethrowers or incinerators, and dealing damage with a weapon that stacks the damage on at the end, like triggers or destructors, which also generate heat and are energy weapons, are perfect for this cabin. For any energy weapon build that generates heat, this is the go-to cabin, and the damage bonus seriously means business. Unfortunately, this cabin doesn't scream Leviathan potential, but otherwise a solid cabin that gets the job done. A tier. Now we get to the cabins of legends. Behold the Beholder. Rocking the third highest adjusted maximum mass of medium cabins at 11,700 kilograms with an above average power and good acceleration, the Beholder has an 85 km/h top speed, which was actually nerfed down from 90. Good with all movement parts and perfect weld points on a 6-pin wide, 8-pin long, and 4-pin tall geometry, the Beholder is the second medium cabin to have 2 perks, albeit only one active at a time. If your build does not have a Chameleon, or Chameleon Mark II, then the Beholder grants invisibility for 5 seconds with a 23-second cooldown. If your build does have one of these modules, then it enhances the effects of invisibility. Taking damage no longer immediately ends the cloaking effect. It should be noted at this point 2 things. The effects of the Cheetah engine do not reduce the cooldown of the built-in Beholder invisibility, and if your build has an invisibility module and it is destroyed, you can immediately use the Beholder invisibility. I'll be going over this in a separate video, but invisibility is strong. Very strong. An invisibility module costs 1 energy, and this mimics the effect of that module for 0. This makes the Beholder technically have 12.5 energy. Additionally, shooting an enemy who is cloaked with the Beholder does not decloak them unless the damage destroyed their Chameleon. It doesn't even show hit confirmation nor damage numbers. Many people would argue that the Beholder is quite possibly the best cabin in the entire game, and they could be right. S tier. The final cabin on the list, the Nova. The Nova has the highest adjusted maximum mass for a medium cabin in the game at 13,100 kilograms. This is so much mass, it's creeping up to the door of heavy cabins. The Nova has a fitting power to match, second in class only to the Step Spider, with good acceleration and a top speed of 75 kilometers an hour. Like the Beholder, the top speed of the Nova was similarly nerfed from 80. This cabin can be used with all movement parts in the game, and due to its perk, it's likely the only true viable front-facing hover cabin. Following the trend of the Pilgrim and the Photon before it, the Nova's geometry has a decent pocket in the rear, and, like the Photon, is also 8x8x4 pins in size, sloped geometry, and average weld points. The Nova's perk is complex but powerful. Activating the perk creates a damage shield in front of the cabin that has approximately 600 health. This field has a 20-second cooldown unless the field is destroyed. If the field is destroyed, the cooldown is reduced to only 6 seconds. As with all shields, explosive damage is increased dramatically to them, and the Nova additionally has a second penalty. If you install the Aegis Prime module, the duration of the shield it generates is reduced by 75%. Notably, this has no effect on equipped barrier 9s. One final note about the geometry: you must keep the front of your build open to allow for the shield to be generated, or else the Nova's perk will not function. There are just too many builds in this game to count that use the Nova. Big ram spider walkers of all kinds, front-facing scorpion hovers, retchers, cannon builds. The only thing you really don't see is mandrake builds. This is a powerful cabin whose perk can increase the durability of your build 2 to 3-fold if you play right. Remember those people who I said would argue that the Beholder is quite possibly the best cabin in the entire game? Yeah, they're arguing with the people who use the Nova. S tier. Whew, this was a long one, a real long one, an extremely long one. You have no idea how much exponentially more difficult these videos get. The more cabins, the more things that are on them. So I'm just glad to finally be done with the medium cabin tier list. So I pass the question off to you. What do you think? Do you agree, disagree? Voice your hatred for my opinions in the comments below. And if you like what you see here, slap a like. And if you want to see more Cardboard Ninja content, hit that subscribe button. Until the next time, my cutouts, peace.